We're back now with new data from the FBI that shows dramatically declining crime rates across the U.S. Still, though, a majority of Americans believe crime is getting worse, even though this new information paints a different picture.
The numbers indicate there was a significant drop in crime last year, continuing the trend that started just after the end of COVID pandemic lockdowns. Here with a deeper dive on these numbers is co-founder of Datalytics, Jeff Asher. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us this morning. So when looking at these stats provided by the FBI, what are the major takeaways from the data for you? What have been the key factors in the fact that it seems crime rates are improving quite a bit?
I think the first thing we have to do is caveat that these are preliminary numbers. It's coming from about 13,000 agencies out of the 18,000 total that will report by the end of the year. And in October, the FBI will put out their final numbers. What we see is a dramatic 13% decline in murder, which really jumps out. The previous largest decline 1 year to the next nationally was 9% in 1996. So it certainly suggests that last year we had the largest 1 year decline in murder that's ever been recorded. The violent crime, 6% violent crime rate decline would be on top of a violent crime rate decline last year that the FBI reported, and could potentially lead to the lowest violent crime rate ever reported nationally, and significantly down from where violent crime was in 2020, down even further from where it was in the 90s. Also saw a decline in property crime, which was kind of marred by a big increase in auto theft, which was driven a little bit by social media trends that were leading to certain models of cars being easier to steal than others.
So let's talk about the public perception here. A Gallup poll released at the end of last year found nearly 80% of adults in the U.S. believe crime was getting worse. Why the disconnect here? How do you flip that?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is this data vacuum. Again, it won't be until October that we have 2023's final numbers. If you can imagine waiting until the summer to figure out who won last year's World Series, that's essentially the world of crime data. So we have to scrape by other sources, and this quarterly data, preliminary data from the FBI is really helpful for that, but it's not final. The other sort of explanation that I tend to point to is that there's this saying, the media doesn't cover the planes that land. And we don't usually see crime stories of, hey, there were no murders yesterday, nobody got robbed, there were no shopliftings. It's only when events occur that we tend to hear about them. And that leads people to develop these anecdotes and this understanding from incomplete information or from recency bias. And then we've seen huge amounts of partisanship in this issue. Only, and I say only, 52% or so of Democrats said that crime rose last year in this Gallup poll that you're referencing, which is still the largest share of Democrats, but it was nearly 90% of Republicans. And so we've seen this widening partisan gap on what different people believe about crime trends based on their political persuasion. And that's a very new phenomenon nationally.
So we saw this spike in crime during COVID, right? Let's talk now about what some of these significant challenges are that remain for law enforcement. Just a minute ago on our screen, we were playing video of something that does seem to kind of be a newer trend, or at least something that we're hearing a lot more about, to your point, something that we're covering more, the smash and grabs or crash and grabs, depending on the situation. What different types of crimes are law enforcement now having to deal with?
Auto theft is the one that is become a much more serious issue over the last 12 to 18 months. In the summer of 2022, a video was on TikTok that showed how to steal certain models of Kias and Hyundais. And in a lot of cities, overnight, you basically saw doubling or tripling of auto thefts. And usually crime goes up 5%, maybe it goes down 10%. That's a large decline or a large increase. You were seeing 100, 150% increases almost overnight. The real issue that I think a lot of agencies are dealing with are more structural. Agencies lost a lot of officers between 2019 and 2022, especially big agencies, and they're really struggling to hire. So this means that they're struggling with response times. It means that clearance rates for things like murder have reached historic lows. And with these being more structural issues, they're not easy solutions. Agencies are trying to throw money at recruits to get more officers on board, and that's not necessarily turning things around like it did in the 90s when the federal government and states and cities could just spend a lot of money on police recruiting, and it led to larger classes.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.